And while we were on the program book, we would like to thank Sarah Wright and the Central Reformed Congregation for overseeing its printing. Thank you all very much. Music. Music was such an important part of the civil rights movement, and it is going to be an important part of our evening together. It is a pleasure to now introduce to you our soloist for this evening, Mr. Kevin Sanders Nelson, baritone, who will be accompanied in his first selection tonight by Mr. Dwayne Buggs.
We will now meet two more youth who give us hope. They are part of the first class of members of Cultural Leadership, an educational and leadership program that is linking African Americans and Jewish youth together to fight racism, anti-Semitism, and all forms of discrimination. Rachel Winston is a senior at Ladue High School and a member of my congregation, Co-Brilliant Presbyterian Church. She is in the National Honor Society, vice president of LAASA, that's the Ladue African American Student Alliance, and plays the clarinet in the school band. Matthew Clayman is a senior at Metro High School in the St. Louis Public Schools. Now, that may sound strange until you hear that Matthew lives in Chesterfield and values diversity as well as academics, so he makes the reverse commute every morning and night to Metro. He goes to Rabbi Lipnick's congregation, B'nai Amunah, and is active in his Jewish youth group, BBYO, which stands for B'nai Birth Youth Breath Youth Organization. I'm going to get all these words together. I'm going to know all the Jewish words before this is over. He wants to study biology and become a doctor. The cultural leadership site is listed in the program. Philip, and I hope you will go there and all of you learn about cultural leadership. I'm also on the board of directors, so definitely we want you to go there because we'd like for you to make a contribution to us. Please welcome Rachel and Matthew.
Thank you and good evening. Rachel and I are happy to be here. I've been privileged to be part of the inaugural class of Cultural Leadership. Every month we met together on a Sunday and we had a workshop devoted to African American and African history, Jewish history, racism, anti-Semitism, and we learned leadership skills as well. We had 3 retreats throughout the year. Every Friday night on a retreat, we would go to a different synagogue for Shabbat services and on Sunday morning for church services. The first retreat was held almost a year ago on MLK weekend, and it opens up to what we will be doing for the rest of the year and got us talking about some tough issues. The second retreat was devoted to the civil rights movement, and we were honored to have Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth fly in and speak to us. At that time, we had no idea how important he was until the summer. We then understood how important he was to both the civil rights movement and to Birmingham, Alabama. Over the summer, we went on a 3-week life-changing trip to New York City, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, then Anniston, Birmingham, Montgomery, Tuskegee, and Selma, Alabama, and then to Mississippi, where we visited Meridian, Jackson, Utica, and then Greenville, Greenwood, Clarksdale, Money, and Ruaville in the Delta, to Little Rock, Arkansas, and finally Memphis, Tennessee. Our trip was devoted entirely to the civil rights movement and other places that do with social injustices and human rights. Along the way, we visited many museums dedicated to these, and we spoke with many living legends of the civil rights era. Some of the speakers included Rabbi Mark Schneier, Congressman John Lewis, Elizabeth Eckford, who was one of the Little Rock Nine, and one of my favorites, Julian Bond. Julian Bond spoke to us about the status of African American and Jewish relations. One recurring theme that he kept coming back to was the importance for the 2 quintessential victims of Western society to form an alliance. This alliance was started earlier than the civil rights movement, but it was then when it reached its peak. Both the NAACP in 1909 and the Urban League in 1910 were started by blacks and Jews. Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald, a wealthy Southern Jew, created 5,000 schools in the South for blacks in the first half of the 20th century. At one point, 40% of Southern blacks attended Rosenwald schools, and we visited one. Jewish and black relations in the civil rights movement will always be associated with the murders of Andrew Goodman, Mickey Schwerner, and James Chaney. Goodman and Schwerner were northern Jewish boys who went south to help during Freedom Summer, the effort to register black residents in the South to vote. They joined up with black Mississippi native James Chaney, and together the 3 were murdered, and their story received national attention. The marches from Selma to Montgomery started a short time later. At first, the first march came to a bloody end on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and MLK issued an order for more marchers. One of the supporters was Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. Together, they walked hand in hand several times. 2 religious leaders from St. Louis, Sister Ebo and Rabbi Litnick, also joined them in the March for Equality. On our journey in cultural leadership, we were able to walk across the bridge as well, hand in hand. We all experienced an aha moment when a police car passed us by. 40 years ago, that trooper would have been on the other end of the bridge waiting to beat us. Instead, he honked his horn at us, urging us on. Let me tell you something that happened to us in Mississippi. One evening, late at night, we were all swimming in a pool at a hotel. An elderly white woman came up to one of us and asked who we were and what we were doing there. He told her that we were cultural leadership and explained what we were doing. She paused for a moment and said, "If only the whole world was like you all in this pool, we wouldn't have the problems we have today." While standing in an elevator at the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, Tennessee, an elderly African-American couple made a comment that I will not forget. I had just told them why I was visiting and the purpose of my journey, and they made me understand how important the Jewish and Black connection really was. They told me that without Jewish aid during the Civil Rights Movement, it would have been a losing battle, and they were thankful for the help. It was at that moment that I understood that no lecture or exhibit on Black-Jewish connections would have the same impact as that statement. One thing that we all came away with from the trip and our year is the understanding of how important it is to get the real history of the Civil Rights Movement. We all understand that it is up to us to pass on the knowledge we gained and hope that others will pass on the knowledge in turn. Thank you. And now let me introduce Rachel.
Good evening. Everything starts with a dream. These words were spoken to us this past summer by Reverend Samuel Billy Kyles. He was a dear friend of Dr. Martin Luther King and shared with us in great detail what happened the night of his assassination on April 4th, 1968. Reverend Kyles is the only living person who was on the balcony when Martin Luther King was shot. He was the one who made the phone call to the police notifying them of what happened. During our time with Reverend Kyles, he stressed to us the importance of dreams, and not only those of people like Dr. Martin Luther King, but in fact dreams of our own. One point he made to us repeatedly was that there's power in a dream. And I've come to the conclusion that Reverend Kyles is definitely onto something after reflecting on my year in cultural leadership. It has been nothing but the dreams of selfless individuals that have allowed us, the first generation of Americans born into equal opportunities and freedom, to be where we are today. Dreams fuel the world. They inspire, provide hope, and create change. Our year in cultural leadership allowed us not only to learn of the powerful dreams for equality and peace that so many who have come before us have dreamt, such as Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, Dr. Martin Luther King, Sister Ebo, and Rabbi Lipnick, but to actually feel a part of these dreams. Cultural leadership has given us the knowledge, the courage, and the confidence to help make these dreams and the dreams of our own a reality. Matt has told you of our life-changing trip this past summer, and I'd like to share with you some of our experiences on our journey. In New York City, we toured Ellis Island and the Tenement Museum on the Lower East Side. We were able to experience and feel firsthand the hopes and dreams of many European Jews who came across the Atlantic, leaving all they had and all they knew for the dreams they felt they could achieve in America. In Washington, D.C., we met with Jewish Congressmen Barney Frank and Henry Waxman, Black Congressman Mel Watt, and our own Lacey Clay, who got to where they are today, fueled by a desire to represent the interests of not only just Blacks and Jews, but all members of society who desire a nation where equal opportunity is prevalent for all. Also, while visiting D.C., we visited the Holocaust Museum, where we learned even more about the detrimental dreams of Adolf Hitler and his ideal Aryan race. We saw with great detail all of the horrible atrocities he committed against the Jews, supported by no other justification than hate. Near Atlanta, we spent the weekend at a Jewish summer camp. An interesting thing happened to us at Camp Barney. As many of you may or may not know, us young people like to listen to rap music. And rap music contains the N-word and a lot of derogatory statements about women. We went to a dance while at Camp Barney, and at the dance, rap music was played. For the first time, the lyrics offended a lot of us. So I can say that cultural leadership has given us all new ears. In Selma, where Rabbi Herschel and Reverend King were first arm in arm, we visited Brown Chapel AME Church, the site where all of the planning for marches and protests happened. Just across the street from Brown Church is a housing project. This complex and the people who lived there during the Civil Rights Movement played a crucial role. Many of the people there unselfishly gave up their homes, their time, and sometimes their jobs in order to make the marches and protests successful. These selfless individuals and families took in wounded marchers and protesters and cared for them while they made recoveries. They would cook meals and provide accommodations for all those people who came into Selma. I found the altruism of these people to be so incredible and inspiring. Everyday people, like me and like you, helped to make freedom available for generations to come. One of the most foremost ideas I acquired during our summer journey is that I do not need to be defensive about my history or my past as an African American in order to be proud of it. Early in our trip, I found myself comparing many aspects of Jewish history to many aspects of my own, thinking there's nothing that could have happened to them that is worse than would happen to us. However, I could not have been more wrong. Not only is it unnecessary to try and determine which peoples had worse atrocities done to them, but in a world like ours that is filled with so much intolerance and injustice, we must not allow differences to be our main focus. Instead, we must let them be what connects us and allows us to move forward together. I can tell you that after having completed a year in cultural leadership, and we actually graduate tomorrow, I have changed in so many ways. Socially, I've gained amazing friends, a first-hand look and perception on what my ancestors encountered as African descendants here in America, a deeper understanding of the Jewish faith, and a mindset that often reminds me of the importance of tolerance. We're often told that cultural leadership prepares us to be change agents that will end racism, anti-Semitism, and discrimination, and I'm a testament to the validity of that statement. With the continued support of my family, my friends, I'm confident that I can make a positive change in this world. Indeed, everything really does start with a dream. From our very beginnings to our current existence, our lives have been shaped by them. Cultural leadership, a one stream itself, has taught me that I'm an ordinary person who, by believing in myself and my dreams, can achieve extraordinary things. Cultural leadership has opened my mind as well as my heart. My parents and I have celebrated Passover with a Jewish classmate of mine and her family. I've worshiped in synagogues and wished my peers Shabbat Shalom. I've praised Allah in a masjid or neighborhood mosque. I've even celebrated my faith in churches very different from my own. I've been empowered, enlightened, and enthused. Cultural leadership has taught me that I am an ordinary person who is capable of extraordinary things, and I truly believe this. On behalf of cultural leadership, Matt and I would like to congratulate Sister Ebo and Rabbi Lipnick. Thank you.
Karen Kalish is the founder of Cultural Leadership. When we designed this program, when we conceived of it, we said we wanted it to have youth. And when we spoke to Rabbi Lipnick and Sister Ebo, they told us it should and better have youth. Because that's what this is about. It's about passing this spirit and energy on. So whether it's Rachel and Matt and Emma and Omega, we're so glad that they're all here with us tonight. We mentioned Freedom Ride 99 earlier when you met Omega, and we mentioned Emma earlier this evening. That week-long bus trip, which was just as tiring as the one that they were talking about, I could tell you, left from the World Black History and Wax Museum on St. Louis Avenue, and if you've never been there, I certainly encourage you to go visit. It was at the send-off celebration for our bus that Sister Ebo and Rabbi Lipnick had their reunion, with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch photographer capturing that very moment in the picture that you see on stage, which ended up gracing the entire front of the Saturday Post-Dispatch on June 19, 1999. One of the speakers at that send-off event was Eugene Redman, himself a well-known activist in the civil rights movement, particularly going back to that period of time in Freedom Summer. He's a professor of poetry at Southern Illinois University, also helping to push and educate our youth. And he has been honored as the Poet Laureate of East St. Louis. He had been scheduled to read an original poem of his at the 1999 Martin Luther King Awards program, where he himself was to get an award. But due to snow, he was prevented from landing in St. Louis that evening. We got to hear at the very first time it was ever read publicly when our bus was getting ready to leave, and you get to hear that same poem tonight and get to thank Eugene for all of his efforts in the civil rights movement. Eugene?
wonderful, multi-layered, edifying evening. And I just have to quake. I'm thinking now that between Sister Evo and Rabbi Lipnick, we have a century, at least, of very serious activism. And of course, the word activism is just an understatement. There's so many superlatives, but I've been in their presence and I know of their work, and I'm very pleased to be in this light with them this evening. Before I read my poem, Dreamer of Kings, I'm going to read just a few lines from a poem that I read, a commission piece I read at the 45th reunion of my high school class. You know, if you live long enough, you will have a 45th reunion. And their friend, the Dr. Lena Weathers, who is president of the board of directors of the Katherine Dunham Centers for Arts and Humanities, she's in the house, and she's from the same school, a few years before me. The two things happened while I was in high school that were seared into my consciousness. One was the slaughter of Emmett Till in August of 1955. And the other event took place about 100 days later on my birthday, on my 18th birthday, and that was Rosa Parks' refusal to give up her seat. And both happened in that realm of the year, you know, in 1955 in high school. You can imagine what that does, you know, to teenagers. One, of course, the assassination of a teenager, and that very courageous act by Rosa Parks. And it said, you know, you have to do more than look at girls. Something more out there. So these are just a few lines from that poem, and it's set in the era of the Till Parks phenomena. It wasn't Elmore James' Muddy Waters or Howling Wolf growling, "Dust my broom," or Big Mama Thornton driving a hound dog from Big Sister's door, or the Coasters crooning Charlie Brown from hi-fis and jukeboxes at the greenhouse or Masonic Hall. It was Lincoln Knight, Amos Leon Thomas, expanding, contracting against walls in the boys' room. Who did they kill? Emmett Bobo Till. Who did they kill? Emmett Bobo Till. Anticipating the quietly explosive freedom ride of Rosa Parks, Montgomery's dauntless seamstress, as shock troops of "We Shall Overcome" invaded the evil kingdom of Orville Faubus on the planet Arkansas. Oh, who did they kill? Emmett Bobo Till. Who did they kill? Emmett Bobo Till. Who lit Montgomery spark? That dauntless seamstress, Rosa Parks. And now the poem itself. Thank you. The Dreamer of King. We've just emerged from the universal holiday season, and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa that captured our imaginations, our spirits, our physical selves. We recommitted ourselves to the struggles and the histories and cultures, the linguistic bases that those two important observances came out of. And this Dreamer of Kings is couched in the Kwanzaa language and ritual, and those practices, the 7 values in Guzo Saba, or Umoja, Ujima, Ujamaa, Kujichagulia, Kumba, Nia, and Imani. And so they're woven into this dreamer of kings. The dreamer returned from Memphis, a sword curved like a rainbow. Death had sniped another king, but even armor-piercing hatred could not slay the dream. Formed into colors like Emmett Till, Taylor Jones III, Ethel Scott, Ivory Perry, Cheney, Goodman, and Swerner, and Homer Randolph, the Umoja rainbow bent toward East Boogie, lighting marches across clan caves of ignorance into Kujichagulia's golden forest of freedom. Over mountaintops the rainbow arched, and Ujima soared, plowing minefields of sleepwalkers, planting seeds of we shall overcome, and growing bumper crops of consciousness harvested by seedling kings in prayer-powered laboratories of Ujamaa. Before the dream warriors climbed and descended their mountains, they fetched gauntlets from the knights of Nubia and caught the batons flashing in the palms of swordsmen and gardeners, sister squads, preacher platoons, brother battalions, and child regiments that form the flanks and wedges of our century's consciousness crusade. Nor could 3 decades quiet the burning Nia or quench the thirst for Kuumba, improvising like leaping Leon Thomas upon the familiar melody of freedom. From East St. Louis to North St. Louis, Brooklyn to Kinloch, a sparkling Imani embraces us like an amen, a right on, a blast from the past of those who walk the mountain tops of history to plant the seedling kings to be. The sister and rabbi.
Thank you, Professor. There are copies of his poems that will be available in the display on the display tables for you to take with you at the reception. Looking out at you from the stage up here, it is clear to